Ramble.
Thank you to Rosetta Stone for sponsoring this episode.
We love our unions. Welcome to Guilty Pleasures, the show that loves what it loves. And oh my God, what the fuck is going on? This is not a typical episode. This is a motherfucking special. That's right. Our corn daddy is out of town, still on his honeymoon light. But don't worry, me and Rick, good old Rick, got you covered.
Yeah, we do.
We're actually doing an entire episode about the thing that has been plaguing us personally, existentially, career-wise for the last how many months?
4.5, 5-ish?
The Hollywood strike.
Yeah. Oh my God.
We felt it important to cover this topic for an entire episode because we realized that a lot of you, dear watchers and listeners, Guilty Whores, that's the name of our podcast audience, by the way, in case no one told you, that you guys don't really know much about this strike beyond perhaps just what you're seeing from Twitter or, you know, the news or maybe on TikTok. So we wanted to really dive into the details about what's going on, where the status is, and we had to bring in an expert.
Yeah, we did.
So, Garrick, do you want to
give
a good old intro?
We brought in my WGA captain on our show, Rick and Morty writer, Animaniacs writer, Jess Lacher. Thank you so much
Jess.
for
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for doing this.
Yeah, of course.
I think a good place to start as someone that is not in the WGA, me, I'm coming from the layperson world. How the fuck did this start? Like, how did we get here?
Great question. Well, all of the Hollywood unions, like the WGA and SAG and IATSE, are on 3-year contracts. So every 3 years, our contract is up, and then we go back to the companies to say, what will the terms look like for the next 3 years? And I think 3 years ago, there was a feeling that if we hadn't been in the middle of COVID, we might have pushed things then, but we were in the middle of COVID. So we sort of let those negotiations just like roll through. But then when we got to May of this year, our contract was up on May 2nd. Ooh. And there was a real rumble. I mean, we had a feeling like going into it that it was likely that there was going to be a strike.
Wow.
So when May 2nd came, our board, our negotiating committee of the WGA had been talking to the companies and trying to reach an agreement, and they were still like very far apart. So they voted to strike. So we started our strike, the WGA strike, on May 2nd. And the things that we were fighting for seemed just really like non-negotiable. Like it just didn't feel like there was a way to accept the terms that the studios were offering, even to the extent where it felt to us, I think, like what the studios were offering was designed to incite a strike.
they were offering the death of writing.
Exactly.
Death of the career as a whole.
And really like offering terms that felt insulting, like that they wouldn't engage with us on things that we had asked for. It didn't feel like they were really trying to make a deal with us. It felt like they were sort of saying like, fuck you guys, this is where we are, take it or leave it. And so we walked.
And can I stop you real quick to ask a couple questions of like the outsider looking in? When you're talking about the people you're in negotiations with,
totally.
We're talking about studios. What does that mean? Because there's
there's a group called the AMPTP. It's all the big studios. It's like Sony, NBC Universal, Netflix, Warner Brothers Discovery. It's all the companies.
And a lot of people don't know that these companies actually like own other like
subsidiaries.
So like people wouldn't maybe
Disney
necessarily
owns-
realize that Disney owns Hulu
and ABC and all
Yes.
of those.
But it was it was everything, all of those networks except for independent.
Yeah, indies are different. They have and some of them were able, and like these SAG waivers that have been happening, like
I believe like A24 got a bunch.
Yeah.
where they-
could like work outside the contract because they just agreed to the terms that SAG was asking
I think
for.
that was like the first sign of like the disparity between the studios and the unions was when the indies were like gladly
we can do it.
fighting
Yeah.
for
Well,
it.
and I think that is the thing. So now that we're at the end of this, so the WGA was on strike for 148 days to get the deal that we got. SAG is still out on strike. And the deal that we got, if you look at it, there is nothing in that deal that feels like it needed 148 days of strike to reach.
all.
It is a totally reasonable deal. There's nothing crazy about it. There's nothing that is like so mind-blowing that we had to like shut the town down.
Yeah.
So that's what I was going to ask too, is like when you say you go on strike, people thought, okay, so writers go on strike. That all that means is like nothing's being written right now, right? But like, can you explain what that meant? Like when you guys went on strike, everything.
Well, the thing the thing that was huge about this strike was that the Teamsters, who are basically like the people who drive the trucks, said at the very beginning that they would not cross picket lines. So when we threw up a picket line, not only did it mean that like nothing was getting written, but it meant that the trucks that have the lights in them wouldn't cross the picket line to get into the studio.
Go to work.
It's a huge deal.
So it had massive implications, and the WGA was throwing up like location-based pickets where they would go. You know, there were pickets like in Cape Cod. There were pickets all over New York City. So wherever there was a picket line, there was disruption to productions. And productions still were able, some of them, to continue with scripts that had already been written.
Right.
And that was like technically kosher, as long as there wasn't any writing being done on set. But what you realize if you are on set is, and I'm sure, Garrick, you probably...
Yeah, it's a huge deal. They literally will rewrite a script the day before you start filming.
And that's what you see in movies when actors are running into their dressing rooms being like, we got the new pages. And they're like, I have to learn all of this.
Yeah,
it's like that
it's
happens. It's very common practice.
It's very common practice. It's constant. It is sometimes throughout the entire production of that episode.
Right.
So you'll be shooting an episode for like 3 or 4 days, and then you'll get new pages from the third day that are different from the first day, that are different from the fourth day. And so I am so like curious because I know that House of Dragon, or I'm not even supposed to, I'm not promoting anything. I guess not. Or House of Dragon is coming out, and that was filmed without on-set writers. So if anybody's really trying to pay attention to the dip in quality of not having your writers on cam or on set with you, that's one of the bigger that'll probably be one of the bigger shows to pay attention to.
And it also sort of makes you wonder, like, did they really lock it down? Like they didn't change a single word on set.
They didn't change a single word.
You have to imagine there's no way.
Yeah. No, not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. It's something's gonna make people very upset.
Yeah.
I feel like I think that there's gonna be like, oh wow, this is really good. And then halfway through like episode 5, you're like, wait, what
the fuck
happened here? Yeah.
What happened to that character I loved so much and who's gone now?
Right.
I'm curious too, as like you guys were preparing to strike, right? Like I know some writers on big scripted shows that make a like writing was making a lot of money, but that's a very small percentage. And what the like quality and how much they give they weren't even getting like their worth necessarily. And so for people who make, you know, the big bucks, if you will, as writers versus people that are just getting started, getting their big breaks, getting into rooms, like how did you guys prepare and also provide safety nets for people financially? Because I couldn't imagine looking and being like, we're about to go on strike. We have no idea how long this is going to last, but I have no choice but to fight for my rights.
Yeah.
Like how can you talk a little bit about like how you guys came together to support each other?
I mean, it's a great question. I think one thing that made this strike in particular possible for the writers, and I think it's this similar for the actors, is that it is a career where you'll work for 3 months and then you won't work for 9 months, or you'll work for 6 months and then you won't work for a year.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people in this industry are really accustomed to long lags between jobs. And you just sort of like squirrel your money away.
Yeah.
Planning for the long winter.
Absolutely. There's so many long winters.
The winters are long and they're cold.
They're cold and everybody's just trying to gather nuts underneath a tree or something like that.
So I think we were trained to, I mean, when you look at the strike, like I'm so curious about what's going to happen with like the United Auto Workers and some of the other strike labor movements that are happening. But I think for our industry in particular, we were really well suited to just like buckle down and have a long period without work. And the other thing that was great about this industry is, like, as you said, a lot of people in this industry make a lot of money. And so they were able, the WGA already had a pretty robust strike fund that just existed for things like this. And then in addition, there were other, the Actors Fund. Is it called the Actors? I always forget what it's called. The Entertainment Community Fund is what it's called now. But they had a huge assistance fund too, where I know like the board of the WGA were all making personal contributions. There were writers, showrunners donating like millions of dollars to those relief funds. So that was something that felt really it felt really cool and really important that there was like an acknowledgement of how much disparities there is in this business. And that was like part of why we were going on strike, right? Is because the people who came up 15 or 20 years ago are so flush. They were so well taken care of. They had like broadcast shows that pay them residuals that they're able to just sort of like coast on for the rest of their lives. Whereas people who are coming up now, it's really like scraping some scraps together and hoping that you can like pay your rent. So it felt like there was an acknowledgement that was something that was happening and that people need to fix.
And I think the other, sorry, did you want to?
No, I mean, we're bringing up residuals. It just always reminds me about this one writer's story who was writing on The Simpsons for however many years.
God bless.
Like, God bless. Oh my God, he really got the good one. You know, writing on The Simpsons for like, I don't know, at least probably 10 years or something like that. And he said that not even when the show aired, but like when they did one of those marathons of The Simpsons, he has 4 kids, and he was like, from the residuals alone, halfway through that marathon, all of their college was paid.
My God.
Yeah.
And so
like,
it's incredible.
It's incredible. So it's just like that entire cushion went away with streaming. All of that is gone. There's no idea of like, okay, if I'm on this show, I'm taken care of in those long stints of time because I'm being paid residuals for the work that I did and for the IP that I contributed to over the course of
that was mostly what I was gonna ask to clarify too, was like, I think people saw on like Instagram and Twitter, people kind of, these actors coming out being like, oh no, you guys don't understand that, like, yes, you've heard of these cushy stories, but streaming changed everything. What happened when streaming became the normal or like the preferred way to consume media, that the contracts didn't change or like the standard didn't change over?
Let me try not to say something just like blatantly incorrect, but I think so. The last writer's strike, which was in 2007, was about streaming, and it was because there was this whole new thing that was at the time called new media, and it meant stuff that was streaming. It was not covered under the same basic agreement as like theatrical releases. It was you could tell that it was going to go its own bad way, and so the people in 2007 were trying to put controls on what streaming would become, but I don't think they really could see how much it would change the landscape of how things are made. And so I don't think we were able to get everything. Like if we could go back to 2007 and make an agreement like from now, I think that like we would have gotten a better deal for streaming, and some of these problems never would have evolved.
It is almost time for the holidays. Maybe you're going to see some of the Christmas markets over in Sweden. Wouldn't it be cool if you could learn a new language for the holidays? But if you're like me, learning a new skill can be really tough unless you've got something very clear, concise, and most importantly, trusted, which is why I want to introduce you to Rosetta Stone as the most trusted language learning program available on desktop or as an app, and that it truly immerses you in the language you want to learn. Personally, my sister was heading off to Portugal, and I knew she was going to need this app to get ready for her trip, so I gifted one to her. And guess what? She's speaking to every single person. It also has fast language acquisition. It's convenient, and it's an amazing value. A lifetime membership has all 25 languages for any and all trips and languages needed in life. Don't put off learning that new language. There's no better time than right now to get started. For a very limited time, our listeners can get Rosetta Stone's lifetime membership for 40% off. That's $179 for unlimited access to 25 language courses for the rest of your life. Redeem your 40% off at rosettastone.com/guilty today.
I genuinely think that in 2007, if they got those protections, streaming wouldn't exist the way that it does.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that they would have immediately jumped to the ad-supported streaming rather than like it would have been like a TiVo thing,
Right?
Where it's just like you can record this and record all of the commercials that are involved, but for the most part, you have to pay for advertising because I feel like streaming got to blow up to the point that it got to based off of the loophole that they're exploiting with the 2007 strike.
And the fact that like all of streaming was, Netflix became this model for like, it was like, oh, it's disrupting television and it's a new way of making content. But really what it did was it introduced a model of like making huge, really expensive shows and then gauging their success on how many subscribers you have. And it's like, as long as your subscriber count keeps going up and keeps going up, then like it's worth it to spend all this money on making these huge shows. And what happened in the last couple of years is that we realized that's just not how this business works.
Yeah.
Like there's a cap to
There's a set number of
how many
subscribers.
humans there are.
We all have Netflix.
Yeah.
We got it.
Yeah.
And so when that system, which like, it seems pretty obvious in retrospect, like, oh yeah, that system's going to eventually collapse.
Yeah.
But I guess we just decided to like really ride it out.
We got Stranger Things out of it.
See how far we could take it. And so when we went into these negotiations, what we were hearing from the companies was we're not making as much money as we want to right now. So we are taking it out on you. Yeah, exactly. And it's because they broke a system that was making everybody money like hand over fist for 100 years. And they were just like, fuck it, let's stream, baby. Let's see what happens.
Into it.
And what happened was they started making less money. And so when we came to them and said, here are the protections that we want, they were like, tough shit, we're cash poor, so we're offering you a really bad deal in the hopes that we can just sort of like bully you into taking it. But it's true, like it is not the fault of labor when the bosses break their business models.
Exactly.
And we can't be eating shit so that, Ted Sarandos can have like 47 million additional dollars per day.
I think that was like one of the most viral things that came out of this was like we got to see again like the disparity salaries of these huge owners. And so my question is also, why wouldn't they just take that 0.01 cut or whatever, right? I think to the obvious person, you're like, okay, he's just that egotistical and money hungry, or what really actually needed to happen for them to change their business to be able to afford what you guys were asking for? And can you kind of touch on, sorry, 2-part question.
Yeah.
Like, can you kind of touch on the buckets of things you were asking for?
So to answer the first part of your question, I think they didn't need to change anything to be able to afford to pay us what we asked for.
Wow.
They just didn't want to pay us what we asked for. If you look at, and I'm sure you've seen these charts online where it's like, it's like a pie chart and you can see the slice of what the WGA is asking for. And the deal that we ended up getting is for something like $230 million a year. Like that's like a John Wick movie.
Yeah.
That's a single John Wick movie.
It's so bananas that it took this concerted and protracted of a labor effort to get that much money out of the studios when you know that they have that money.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why they drew this really hard line in the sand was because, well, for one, in 2007, the AMPTP was like Warner Brothers and Disney and these companies that had to make movies and had to make TV shows because that was their business. Yeah. And now the AMPTP is like Apple and Amazon and these huge conglomerates, and they don't fucking care if they make. They don't Apple doesn't care if they make a TV show.
It's a tax write-off, right?
It's a tax write-off.
Exactly.
If it fails, who cares? I have the iPhone coming out.
They do not care.
Yeah.
And I think that attitude of big tech companies that are built on exploited labor, that don't care about human beings, and that have a very have a really strapped labor force at the bottom, and then like mega rich men at the top.
Yeah.
Let's be real.
Making billions of dollars. That's the model. Yeah. And so you go into a company like that, and you're like, hey, we are your labor force, and we demand these protections, and they're like, well, we don't want to give it to you.
We don't give protections to people who need to use a bathroom.
Yeah.
Yes.
Why would we give you a protection over
we don't
IP?
We don't care about the people who work in our factories. We don't care about the people who deliver our packages. We don't care about the people we put out of business. Like, they do not care about human beings.
Goes deeper than I think we, as the outsiders looking at this, realize.
And that for me was like the thing that I'm taking out of this strike. Like, I immediately got so, once I started to think about that aspect of it, I got so angry about it. My husband was like, "You've been radicalized by the WGA." And I was like, "It's fuck yeah. I really have been." Like, we work in a town and in an industry where it is easy to sort of like put your blinders on and just like go to work and do your fun show and not really think about the labor force in this country and the way that it has changed and the way that unions have lost power and the way that people have started to have fewer protections. And it's like the consolidation of wealth, and it's the disparity between the top and the bottom. It's really like, to get involved in this strike really like lit up that stuff for me and made me think so much more about it.
Yeah. I'd always heard or like seen reports about the diminishing middle class in America in general, and always thought about that, of being like, yeah, those are the people who are like, nurses or people making however much $1,000 per year, one income household or two income households, and people who, make a decent living.
Yeah, like they'll be fine.
Yeah, you'll be fine. And then realizing as as you age, that you are smack dab in the middle of that class.
Yeah.
And then having that report of the diminishing middle class hit you square in the face.
Yeah.
And I feel like that. I feel like this entire strike was that, where you're like, okay, well, you have to fight against this American idea that we have a lower class, a middle class, and an upper class, and that it is not always about striving for the upper class or trying to get there. And sometimes people just want to make a living so that they can feed their families.
Yeah.
And that's like, that was, I think it was like a huge deal. And if that radicalizes you, then sure, like go for it.
Yeah. And the bigger the differences between the people who have everything and the people who don't have enough, the more those people need a union. Like, they need to have collective bargaining, because it is the only way I wish that we could have just like a general strike in this country where we all just
absolutely,
like where we all were just like, fuck it, like it's not working.
We're not buying shit
we're
today.
not buying shit.
We're not selling shit today.
We're not paying rent, and we're not working.
We're not working.
We're not working
because the system as it exists right now is broken in like a profound way. And I think like something that I've been thinking about is how do you like, what are even the takeaways from the writer's strike? It's such a specific, well-organized, small, it's like the perfect size to do something like this. And we were able, I think, to pull together and do something that feels really important.
Yeah, and I want to touch on the actual specific details of the picket line, but first, just super quick, because I asked a 2-part question, and I want to just go back to like, what were those buckets you guys were fighting for?
Totally.
And then I want to talk about all the crazy picket line shit.
Yeah. Well, the big things that were covered in this deal, there are some basic things like raising minimums and some changes in the way that residuals, and just for, I don't know if everybody listening, like residuals are basically, when you write a script, you get paid for writing a script. And then every time that TV show or movie is watched, like in a classical sense, it was like every time you write Die Hard, and then every time it's on cable, you get
a piece of the
you get
pie.
$20 and then you get $10, and it is usually like a diminishing amount of money, but it continues to be money. And if it's something like Friends, you know, you're still
you're
rich.
Set.
But like, you're fine forever.
Whenever people are like, oh, that actor fell off or whatever, it's just like, no, they're fine. That's why they don't have to work anymore.
Yeah, they don't
totally
have to.
fine.
If you're wondering where David Schwimmer is, it's in his pool. You know?
No pun intended.
Yeah. No pun intended.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So they did make improvements in streaming residuals, in foreign streaming residuals. That was a big thing, the way that residuals are paid out in foreign markets.
Wow.
And then some of the like specific Writers Guild things that they were fighting for. One is room size. So like a writer's room, I mean, like on Rick and Morty, how many people do we have? 10?
10, I think.
I think 10.
Yeah,
like,
one per writer.
Yeah.
One per episode or
nine
something?
or 10. So a good size room is usually like between, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 people. It's like a healthy room full. You can split in half. There's people who are good at different things.
Yeah.
Shows now are more likely to have smaller rooms, to have like 6 or 5 or 4 people. And they've really been trying to like, the companies, obviously, the fewer people are making a show, the cheaper it is. So one thing that the Guild fought for and won on was having minimums for room sizes. So there's a sliding scale basically for like how many episodes of a show there are, where you're required to hire between 3 and 6 writers. Yeah. And a certain number of those writers have to be writer producers, which is a higher level, better paid tier of, there's a real like clear sort of ladder, like a hierarchy in the WGA. And then another thing that was important was having writers on set. Traditionally, it was expected that if you wrote an episode, you would be on set while your episode is being recorded, and you would get a feel for what it's like to produce a TV show.
Not getting paid for that?
No, that used to be that was like part of your job. And increasingly that is not included.
Oh.
Like usually what happens is a room ends, and then you will be extended sort of a courtesy of like, if you'd like to come to set while we're shooting your episode.
It's going to be a pain for all of us, and we got to dilly-dally to get you on set. But like that seems wild. You wouldn't want the writer on set.
Yeah. Well, and it's never that like your showrunner doesn't want you on set. It's that they don't have the money to pay you to be on set. And so
wild.
And what that results in is like people come up, you've been working for 5 or 6 years, you've written a bunch of episodes, but you've literally like never been on a set. Wow. And then how are you going to run a show?
How are you ever going to become that writer producer if you never get to be in the presence of producing?
So anyway, they made this gain with the studios where there, in addition to the showrunner, are 2 paid writers for the duration of post, I think.
Wow.
For the
Or
production
of production.
Yeah, I think they said of production.
Yes,
Yeah,
Garrick
so
is right.
so it's just like the shooting.
Yeah.
I don't think they have to stay around for the edit,
Yeah.
or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just pretty much just allowing them to be on set
Yeah.
and
Wild.
be paid for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a big one. And then, transparency has been something that they've been fighting for a long time. The streamers don't disclose how many people watch anything. So we have no idea how many people.
They could be lying.
We have no idea.
Yeah.
It sort of makes you start to think like, oh, are they hiding something?
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Yes, of course
Yeah.
they
Of
are.
course they are. Yeah.
They don't want their advertisers and their boards to really know how many people are actually watching things.
Yeah.
But they did agree to share that information with the WGA to some extent. If 20% of the people who subscribe to a streamer watch something in the first 90 days, you get some more money.
Yeah.
You're not going to
Wow.
get like Friends money or
Yeah.
Simpsons money, but
Right.
you'll get a little bit of money.
Yeah.
And I think like with all of these gains, they might not be as good as the guild wanted them to be, but it's now in the contract. It's like a codified thing where we can stand on those things
work
in
off
3
of them.
years
Yeah.
framework,
and build on
yeah.
them.
That's crazy that it's every 3 years.
Yeah.
Because this felt like you were making up for the last like 40 years.
Yeah. Well, what Jessica was saying, like they didn't strike during COVID because it's just like, oh, now you don't work on top of the fact that the world is shut down.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like that. That is, I believe Bob Iger said like this is the worst time for them to be doing this, for people to be striking, and it's just like no, there was a
There
even
was a
worse
worse window.
time,
We could have done this to y'all.
and it's just like all right, let's just wait for.
And
a
how
little bit,
quickly
make sure.
the industry's changed. And like,
Yeah.
I think even
Yeah.
just you kind of mentioned like even the AI bucket where like,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
we didn't fucking care about AI 3 years ago.
No.
Yeah, at
We
all.
didn't know.
I mean, we didn't even, honestly, I went to a meeting at the WGA in April. It was like one of the membership meetings sort of leading up to the strike where people could talk about, what are you worried about?
Yeah.
Like, what are you thinking about? Maybe it was like in March, but somebody brought up ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Somebody stood up and was like, what about
are we doing?
ChatGPT? Like, is it going to take our jobs? And everybody was like,
Laugh.
no, it's fine.
Yeah, I remember. I wasn't at that meeting, but I literally remember like going into negotiations in May when they started, or not, it wasn't in May. They started in like April, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
It started off with like the conversation around AI. It was just like, I mean, it'll be fine. Nobody really cares about that. It's just,
That Black Mirror
it's just
episode
script.
Yeah.
was what fucked everybody up
Right.
too.
That's what
But
got
a
us.
good amount of people like were that guy that stood up and was just like, oh, what about ChatGPT? This thing is actually something we should keep an eye on.
And by the time we did go into by the time they got into negotiations, that was one of their bargaining points.
Yeah.
Because it had become so clear just in like
That
those 3 months that it was like a real
Right.
imminent thing that the studios could use to replace us.
Yeah. It was crazy. Like,
and it's developing so quickly.
Oh yeah.
And the big fear was being handed like a season of television written by an AI, and the studio is saying, "Okay, fix this."
Yeah.
and then you get like you get like a
$1.
low level writer on a show
Yeah.
created by an AI or whatever.
Yeah. It would have.
We've all seen the AI written novels, or like
Yeah.
I told ChatGPT to write a story. Like we've all seen how fucked up.
Right. They're not great. And then the other part was, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lacher, they didn't allow for copywritten material to be used to train AI.
So that we
Whoa.
sort of had to punt on. That's one thing that I think in the next contract.
Yeah.
So what they did reach is AI can't write a script. AI can't be like a credited writer.
Yeah.
They can't give us AI material to rewrite, but they can use
Train.
our material to train an AI. And the guild has reserved that, they said, was one of the final things that they were trying to get. And I think it was something that they had to give the studios to get something else for our side. But they reserved the right to take issue with it in the future.
The way that it's used.
Yeah,
sure.
but they weren't able to rule that out. And I think that was because, ChatGPT is being trained on. I think it was because so many other language models are already being trained on copyrighted material that the studios weren't willing to like say that whatever if they had a language model, they wouldn't use the same rules that other language models are.
Got it.
Sure.
You know
which
what I mean?
like
That's such a huge thing because I really do think someone's just going to make another like a counter AI that can search through all the copywritten material that was used to train an AI that is now writing a script for someone else, and then pretty much tattle on the other AI and say this was from this is from this, giving people rights to sue. For their copywritten
like the
material being
WGA's
used.
AI lawyer.
Yeah, it was like it'll probably be like a lawyer AI or something like it does. It creates a new type of lawyer. Like I always remember.
Did we just make up a new TV show?
I think we just made up
like
a new
AI
TV show.
Jag.
I'm in.
Yeah, the AI West Wing or something.
Yeah.
That's definitely politics, but I think that is going to create a new type of lawyer that is going to like search through for copywritten material.
100%, yes.
I remember there was like this one small time lawyer that would go to every comedy show and then sue the venue if they didn't have assisted listening devices.
Oh wow.
And he was, it was just a guy that was just going around. But like all these comedy shows have assisted listening devices. But it's just like that type of like
person.
In a weird sense, ankle biting lawyer that'll then, it'll create a new type of job.
Totally.
And a lucrative job, I feel like.
Oh
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'd love to jump to some of the stories about actual striking, right?
Yeah.
Because I think we saw a lot of the more upper level things. We saw the celebrities going to the picket lines. We saw kind of the outcomes of what people were negotiating. Like we were getting these snippets, but like y'all were out there every single day in a way picketing. And I heard crazy stories about, and I'm not going to name names, but I heard things where cars were getting a little too close to people. I heard studios were chopping down trees so the picketers didn't have shade to sit in the middle of Los Angeles summer. Like, did you guys hear any stories of like, they tried to take us down, but we weren't giving up?
Before we even get into it, I'm just going to fully point out, was not out there every day.
Oh,
Jess was out there every day. I was not out there every day.
Collective union.
Yeah. As a collective, sure, yes. But I was trying to make it out as often as humanly as possible. But yeah, I was not there all the time.
It's okay. It's okay, Garrick.
Yeah, I
it's
feel
okay.
awful taking any form of credit in that regard.
I was out. I ended up being out usually so I was a strike captain. So that just meant that I had like a team, which was mostly the Rick and Morty writers and then a dozen other sort of random people who I communicated with. And then the captains were the ones who were out on the picket lines as much as we could be to like, because there is a lot of logistics, and it also is so, by the end, it has a real camp counselor vibe. We all like have our orange vests and our like captain's hat, and we show up at 8:30 and we like set up the card table and we like put out the snacks. You like make sure everybody has water and sunscreen. And like unsurprisingly, the people who volunteer to be captains it's like a kind of a particular type.
Yeah, sure.
It's a real sort of like it's a camp counselor type, which is I'm
Great.
guilty of that.
You know who you are.
But it ended up for me, I think like being out there so much, if I had been home, I would have been so anxious. And it was such a, at the beginning of the strike, everybody's like, I'm going to write a novel and I'm going to spec this horror movie. I'm going to, I had so many things that I thought I was going to do. And just thinking about the strike before it started, you're like, I'm going to have all this free time. But it was really different. It was hard. I found it very hard to work. But in a time like that, to have a place where you could just go every day and see people who wanted to talk about what was going on. And also then you're really forced to stay positive because there's so many people showing up who you want them to feel good about picketing. You want them to feel like the strike is important and like that they're going to be okay.
Yeah.
So I found that like by being forced to show up and then be like aggressively cheerful, it really changed my attitude towards the strike and made it like easier on me across the board. But it was hard. Like that story about the car. It was my friend actually, Gabe Garza, and another guy. Gabe was a captain at Warner Brothers, and he was in Atlanta picketing, and it was like a line producer on a show that was shooting at the studio, like came at them, like gunned his car at them. They had to like jump out of the crosswalk. I mean, it was completely intentional. People saw it happen. And I think he then like yelled at them but he was just pissed off because they were making it hard for the show that he was working on to shoot. And he ended up, I think, getting fired. I mean, I know there was an investigation.
Fry's not arrested.
Yeah.
But I had that thought many times. It's like a very vulnerable place to be, just like walking outside with a bunch of other writers, and you know that you are inconveniencing some really powerful
people. Just straight up, it's just powerful people who don't even see you as a human being.
Well, they say like there's power in numbers, and what I saw through this was like the community aspect of like people talk about it all the time. Like, well, if you do it, I'll do it. Like, if you do it, I'll do it. Like, this it's really was such an example of like there was so much power in numbers.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I do want to talk about what we've learned is called scabbing, right? Because there were people.
Yeah.
Can you explain kind of what scabbing is and what happened with people who scabbed, or what will happen with people that scabbed?
Yeah.
I'll talk.
You want to talk about scabbing?
I'll talk about scabbing. So scabbing is basically when you take a job from a struck company, and so that is you with your labor crossing the picket line in order to, gain somewhere of yourself or whatever. And the main danger with scabbing is that you are going against a union of workers. Yeah. And so when that strike ends, that union, for lack of a better word, will not fuck with you.
I don't fuck with you.
Yeah, exactly. So whenever people are like, oh yeah, I'm working on this thing, and you're like, wait, aren't we on strike? You're like, yeah, it'll be fine. It's not gonna be fine at all.
Bad.
It's really bad. It's you are undermining the efforts of with WGA 11,000 people.
Yeah.
And while everybody agreed to not work, you are then being extremely selfish and saying, I'm going to regardless.
But I think in terms of the WGA, there really was incredible solidarity. And I heard some like sort of rumors of like this person scabbing and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But I didn't see any of it. I really think people stuck with the union.
Yeah.
And I think people who are in the union, the vast majority of them did not scab.
Right.
I mean, did some like pre-WGA writer like do some work for somebody like under the table? Like I'm sure that happened.
Right.
And I think like most often there will be consequences for that having happened. Like there's like a WGA committee that investigates accusations of scabbing and like takes action.
Wow. So let's kind of fast forward a little bit. There seemed to be a lot of back and forth. Like I just remember in our group chat, it would be like, it could be today. Yeah. But then it was also like, if it's not over by Halloween, it's going to be a long winter. Like next year, summer blockbusters are not happening. Like it definitely felt like we were always coming down to this like pivotal moment.
Event horizon.
What finally kind of made it the moment?
Well, the thing that changed was that the CEOs of the companies got into the negotiations. I think the only thing that changed was that the companies realized that they had lost. I think the AMPTP realized that that the WGA wasn't
Yeah.
going to break.
Yeah.
I
Wow.
think they started the strike hoping that we would break. I think they came back to the table in August making like a kind of a fake offer of a deal. And that was really demoralizing. You know, like everybody got so excited that they were talking again. And then the result of that was like nothing. You know, they came back with some changes to their proposal. We made a counter proposal and they just wouldn't even respond.
Yeah,
Wow.
they put out the entire proposal, saying like, "Oh, look at the."
yeah.
They said they were going directly to
To the membership.
WGA base.
And that's a tactic. Like that is a strategy to break. That's union breaking. That's like the companies saying to us, don't you want to go back to work for these scraps? Like, look at these nice scraps we're giving you.
Yeah.
Come on back to the table. And it didn't work. And I think after that, they realized that they were not going to end this until they made concessions.
Damn.
And so when they did come back to the table finally, it was with like the 4 big CEOs in the room with them.
So who was there before, if not the CEOs? Was it just like lawyers or
lawyers
stuff?
and business affairs?
The AMPTP like committee.
But
right?
that's a great question. I don't know who exactly is the
Yeah.
negotiating committee for the AMPTP.
Right.
I assume it's
Carol Lombardi.
yes, Carol Lombardini
Yeah.
Which
is the
that-
head of the
yeah.
AMPTP.
Is that her real last name?
Lombardini?
But did she go
Lombardini.
kind of
I
Twitter
said
viral?
Lombardi. I'm sorry.
Yeah, when you said Lombardi, I was like, did the
No.
family?
No. Lombardini. I'm sorry.
I think it's Carol Lombardini.
Yeah.
There's a very funny
Oh my God.
fake Carol
Oh, it's
Lombardini.
the fake account. Okay,
Yeah,
I've
it's
been
a parody.
following that.
Yeah, it's a parody account.
Yeah. But the people negotiating were representatives for the companies, but it was not the CEOs of the company. So then it was like Donna Langley and David Zasloff and
Bob Iger was
Bob
there,
Iger
and Sarandos.
Sarandos. Yeah. So those people actually came into
Wow.
the negotiations 2 weeks ago and they were like, fuck this. Let's go back to work. And so what the
Wow.
WGA said was once the CEOs were in the room and the
saw.
conversations were real, it took
Yeah.
3 days to make the deal.
Yeah.
Jesus
It took
Christ.
3 days.
I like
Another
that's insane.
tactic, right? Yeah, they were waiting.
I don't even know if it's a tactic. I think that that's your job as a CEO. Your job is to like Bob Iger's whole thing is that like, oh my God, I made these huge deals with Marvel, with Fox, and with Lucasfilms, right? And like that's like his big win and all that, and that's great. So if your entire job as a CEO is to make deals,
deals.
then you should always be in these conversations.
But you
It's-
have to, it's exactly what you said, though. It's like, it wasn't just their job was to be a studio head.
Right.
They're running these major tech companies
Right.
and they're
Right.
going,
That-
throw
I
those guys
understand.
in,
Right.
see if they can get it done.
And I get that on the app because even Apple or Amazon, none of their CEOs or Tim Cook wasn't there. What's
Because Tim
bald
Cook
guy's
doesn't
name?
know
He doesn't
fucking
know-
anything
Yeah.
about
Doesn't know anything about this.
the business.
Yeah,
He's trying to decide what color iPhone we get
Exactly.
next.
Yeah. You know, I hear he's great, but he doesn't care about the studio
No.
stuff at all. And then the Amazon guy as well,
Yeah.
the Monopoly
Bezos.
man, Bezos. He doesn't care.
No.
So with these legacy studios
yeah.
and Netflix, you have to have that person that like actually cares about going to work in order to like the fact that it only took 3 days.
And that's why I do feel optimistic about the SAG negotiations.
Yeah.
And I hope that they will, whatever happens, I hope they hold out to get what they
deserve.
Because I think they're on day like 84 right now or 80. They're
So
in
they
the
still
80s
have-
right now. We went 148 days before we got an agreement. And I think they've got it in them. Like I think SAG can go the distance.
Yeah.
If they're not getting a good deal, I think they're gonna stay out and strike. But I think that the studios are motivated in the same way that when they came back to the table with us, they were actually motivated to make a real deal. It's like they want the Emmys, they want award season, they want people to be able to promote stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I think now that they've figured it out with the writers, I really hope that they've like come back in good faith and that something will happen.
So that was going to be my next question, right? Was like, we all remember the day that we had a deal, they had a draft, it was ready to go, and everyone was so excited to get back to work. And then we're like, oh wait, but also SAG is still was So the strike is over. Has anything been signed? Are you guys back to work? Are you striking
Great
in
questions.
solidarity with SAG?
We just had the ratification vote go out.
What does that mean?
Started, yes.
Yeah, it started yesterday.
Yeah, so basically they send the deal out to all of the members, and then we get to read it and decide if we accept it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I feel very confident that
Yeah.
it's going to pass. I mean, there are things in this deal that you could wish for them to be a little bit better, but overall, it's really a good.
Yeah.
It's really a good deal. It's like the deal that we deserve to get in.
Right.
It protects it as a career, and it makes sure that the next generation of, because it really, I mean, they talk about this a lot, and it feels sort of like cliche, but you really are striking for people like in 15 or 20 years so that they will still have jobs.
Yeah.
Right.
So that voting is happening right now.
Right.
And I don't know when we get the results, but I'm sort of assuming it's going to pass.
I think it's end of the week.
Yeah.
I think it said like October.
So maybe by the time this comes out next week.
It might
Yeah,
be
it might
fully
be
ratified and over.
yeah.
But the board actually voted to end the strike before the ratification vote
Right.
happened. So
Which is-
the strike did end
Officially.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you guys
last
are
week.
allowed to be going back to work.
Yeah, and a lot of rooms restarted. It's
Yesterday, yeah.
it's a
Are you guys
Tuesday
skipping
today.
work?
What's today's date?
No.
Are y'all playing hockey?
October 2nd.
Yeah, a lot of rooms started on
October
October 2nd. Ours, we are not going back for a few more weeks, which is actually really nice. It's a real whiplashy feeling
Oh, God,
to
I
go
bet.
from, and I've still been out. A lot of us are still picketing with SAG
Yeah.
in solidarity. So to go from like spending a full week on the picket line to like, goodbye, I'm going back to work. It's a weird feeling.
Yeah. But they're like a lot of these bigger rooms are like rushing to get back to like salvage their fall season.
Yeah.
And so with that, you like understand for the most part.
Yeah.
And then I'm sure going back to the SAG deal, I'm sure they'll have to make some kind of concession or some deal because they have to promote these things. Like there's a lot of things that got pushed to the beginning of January or the beginning of like February, let's say. Like an example is
Dune.
if you Dune Dune Part 2. If Zendaya doesn't promote Dune doesn't happen.
Exist.
Dune doesn't work. If Timothée Chalamet doesn't promote Dune, nobody's watching Dune, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And then there's another movie that Zendaya is in.
The
where
tennis threesome
the tennis
Yeah,
one,
I wanna
and
see
if she
that.
doesn't promote that, it's
Not gonna-
over. It's
yeah.
not going to happen. And so there's a lot of those that got pushed to the
Incentive,
beginning of the next year that they have to get people to promote in order for them to exist.
So for you guys to go back to work, and if SAG is still striking, is it kind of okay because there's this buffer between like, now you guys got to write shit and then they'll come and act on it?
That's a great, I mean, I think everybody in the WGA really wants to support SAG and show solidarity with SAG. It is not part of our contract that we can refuse to, like the Teamsters have it in their contract that they don't have to cross picket lines.
At all, no matter whose it is.
Yes,
Got
they
it.
are allowed to on principle not cross a picket line and not get fired from their jobs.
Oh, sick.
But everybody else does not have that in their contracts. The WGA does not have that in our contracts. So we can and will avoid crossing picket lines whenever we can. But I think that's currently being like mostly addressed by Zoom rooms and like hopefully writing. I mean, I would feel really sick to my stomach, honestly, if I had, if I were in a room that had started yesterday that was on a lot with a picket line.
Absolutely.
Especially having spent the last 5 months walking a picket line, I would have a really hard time in good conscience crossing the line.
Yeah, it does feel like you are being punished by your teacher, and you guys all have to stay in the classroom even though the bell rang, and you're watching your friends run outside and run to recess, and you're just looking out of a window, and you're like, "Fuck, man, I really want to be out there." It's just like seeing your friend stuck inside is
While you get to
awful.
go back
While
to
you
work.
get to go back to work is
Are
awful.
you part of SAG?
Yeah.
Wait, so are you technically still on strike?
Yeah.
but you can write.
Right.
I can write.
Right.
Yes,
Yeah. You just can't act. And then we're in a like Rick and Morty is beyond being just like a great job in many ways. It's also the actors. I don't want to get too deep into this because I don't understand it, but for some reason that doesn't make any fucking sense, actors can record voices while on strike. Yeah. It's a different contract.
Yeah.
I don't know. But
you're not here for that information, dear listeners.
It's just really weird. Yeah.
So Rick and Morty is now we are able to work in good faith. Like we're like our actors have been able to record and are still able to record, and now the writers are able to write. So we like as a show
are in the clear.
Got it.
Which is like a lucky position to be in. But hopefully SAG is going to get a deal in the very near future, and then it will just be over and it won't be an issue. But I think that like that question of how do you support another union, I don't know, it's hard.
While also working. I think it's just like, just keeping the engagement up and going out and supporting, going
knowing
on the
it's
picket
not
line.
over.
Knowing that it's not over is a big thing.
Yeah.
Knowing that, it's still a very, very important group of people that literally saved our ass.
Oh my God.
Say by joining.
That was huge.
Yeah, that was a huge turning point.
The feeling on the line. I think we were at like day 60 something when SAG joined. We were so tired. Yeah. It was so hot. It was so demoralizing. And there were days when there were more captains than picketers at the lot where I was or at a certain gate. It wasn't constant, and we did generally have really good engagement and really good turnout, but people just got really tired.
Yeah, of course.
And when SAG showed up, they have SAG has 10 times more members than the WGA has like 11,000 to 12,000 members, and SAG has like 9 billion members. And so it's
every
like
person in Los Angeles.
Yes, all of Los
exactly.
Angeles is in SAG. And so even if like 1% of SAG shows up, it's huge. It's just like a massive turnout. And they were so, as you expect SAG to be, everybody's like so excited to have a megaphone and like they want to hug you and dance. And
they're performers at the end of the day. They were taking on a role.
Yeah. People were doing cartwheels down the crosswalk, all kinds of, not really. But
I live close to a studio and gladly traffic was blocked all the time trying to leave my area because there was some concert going on or some crazy shit across the street. And
insane.
It was
the first day that SAG joined, I was like, I feel like everybody needs to witness this amount of mobility in general.
It was amazing.
It was incredible. There was like at least 2,000 people on the streets walking around.
Yeah.
I might be upping that number, but
there were just like Warner Brothers alone. There were days when we had more than 1,000 people.
Okay.
It was a huge turnout all
insane.
over.
It reminds me a lot of like, and I wonder if the timing, serendipitously, like over COVID, we really saw the way that like people were advocating for like George Floyd and like we saw the way mobilizing human bodies
and
made a huge fucking difference.
I think that is something that they didn't count on for sure.
Yes, totally.
Is that we literally just got out of a show of force in numbers. Yeah. And so this was nothing. It's like, okay, we can just walk we know how to walk in the street. We've been walking in the street
for like humanity.
For the past
2 or 3 years.
4 years.
Well, let's be real.
And there was a ton of crossover too with with the leadership in this strike. And people had come from like social justice work, and people really knew how to they knew how to mobilize people, and they knew how to talk to people, and they knew how to keep people safe.
Holy shit, that was so informative for me. And I thought I knew what was happening. So I appreciate both of you guys coming on.
I hope I haven't said anything that's like really egregiously incorrect.
You should be podcasting really all the time. You're great with your words and speaking.
Yeah, it was very concise as well. And like, I'm learning so much as well. Like, it was great.
Yeah. Well, I'm really great. I am glad to be able to talk about it. And I think just like coming out of this strike, I feel really energized about where this goes and like where this goes beyond the entertainment industry and how to stay engaged in like what is like it's a huge moment in our America is fucked if we don't unionize.
Yeah.
If we don't like start focusing on the people who are like providing the labor in this country. We have to get back to that mindset that people had like in the 50s when you could like when the middle class was real. And I mean, there's a lot of things about the mindset of the 50s that it would be great not to go back to.
But they were burning their bras, you know.
Right.
But I do think that that the union presence that used to exist in this country was part of what like helped America become a powerful place and helped people feed their families and have job security. And we gotta figure out how to do that again.
I feel like if capitalism has handed over the power of the government over to companies, then the worker is just as important in this conversation in general, because
Absolutely.
I don't feel like the government is going to step in and say, hey, I mean, we've been like knocking down the door of like antitrust laws for a while, where the fact that Disney bought Fox in the first place is insane. That you're creating a non-compete. The fact that we're only striking against 8 companies, I feel like 8 studios, when it used to be like 25 or something like that, is wild. And so with all of that, government's not going to step in to like stop these things. So the only way that we actually can is by unionizing.
Well, thank you for your service.
Thank you for your service, Captain
congratulations. Lacher. I mean, I know I got to see just from the outsider looking in how big of a deal this was and how monumental it was. And like you said, I think this is going to be like the conduit for a lot of change and like history. And like, I don't know, maybe in 20 years, we'll look in our history books and be like, I was there. I still have my orange vest.
I'm framing my strike sign. I can't fucking wait.
Your post where you were like, blank strike sign, 20,000 or best offer. It feels silly, but like if people want to follow you and your work, like, do you have anything to promote now that you're not promoting the strike?
No, I'm just a person. I'm just quietly living my life. I hope people will watch Rick and Morty season 7 is coming out in just a minute. We're so excited.
Oh my God.
So excited to see it.
It's so excited. There's so many fucking good episodes.
It's really good. The 7th season of Rick and Morty is really, really good. I didn't even work on it, and I feel proud of it.
I know,
honestly,
right?
I think what we're gonna see come out of like this strike, people going back to work, is gonna be some of the best work we've seen. People's energy and excitement and ideas coming back is gonna be epic. So thank you both for being here. I guess we're gonna give this episode a full pleasure, full send, full P.
Full
Unions
P,
are a full pleasure.
Yeah, unions are a full pleasure.
Nothing guilty about them.
Nothing at all.
But until next time, Guilty Whores, I am Corn Diddy on all the things. I'm Kelsey Darragh on all the things.
I'm Garrick Bernard on all the things.
And we love our union.